You're listening to the Inside Commerce podcast hosted by experienced consultants James Gerd and Paul Rogers. Inside Commerce is your fast track to digital knowledge, featuring interviews with leading e-commerce retailers, industry thought leaders, and the C-suite of key tech companies to explore the latest in digital strategy, customer experience, and tech. Discover what the latest trends really mean and get practical advice based on experience to help fine-tune your e-commerce strategy and tech stack. Follow us on LinkedIn and reach out to James or Paul if you'd like to discuss an e-commerce project. We hope you enjoy the latest episode. Today's episode is sponsored by Swap Commerce, and grabbing more about them later. We are digging into Shopify Editions Summer 24, long-awaited podcast. I know lots of you out there have been wanting us to do this. We were going to record it earlier in the week, but Paul was lost somewhere in Greece with zero Wi-Fi. But, you know, all the best things come to those who wait. And it also means we've been able to bring in a highly experienced Shopify developer, Dan from Bauer, who will introduce himself in a minute. So we're going to get a broader perspective on this. For those of you who haven't seen the latest editions, it's another work of art. Go and have a look at the landing page. Lots and lots of stuff in there. So before we get cracking, Dan, for those who haven't come across you before, do you want to give a bit of an intro to who you are and who you work for?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Dan Gamble, CTO at Buyer Association Only, kind of long-standing Shopify Plus partner. Effectively just, you know, aiming to be and wanting to be probably, if not like the UK's leading Shopify Plus partner in the ecosystem, just very much work in the kind of high luxury verticals, kind of high-end luxury fashion. And yeah, just as you see, not very good at these. So yeah, kind of that's me in a nutshell. I'll keep it short and sweet and hope it can provide a lot more value on that, what I'm saying after my intro.
Nice. I like it. There'll be lots of value coming for you because I know that you are very well placed to talk about this from the developer's perspective, but also you have that commercial understanding from the client needs point of view, which is a really good balance. So we're going to get into specific areas like markets, products, merchandise. Before we do you want to give your, like, I guess, umbrella view, like the overall perspective from a developer's point of view of the latest editions? Strategically, what have you gleaned from it?
To me, this one was quite an interesting additions, I think, from a developer perspective, because like I think there's very few standout kind of developer pieces. It was much more of a consolidation, which I really quite liked. It felt like a really mature release. I think things like combined listings, the taxonomy stuff, these are like kind of, they're now ready for us as devs and like the wider ecosystem to use, but they were announced at like the prior edition. So for me, I really like that this was just a really nice, mature kind of coming of age thing. There's a couple of things like the hydrogen kind of visual editor that I think, has always been on a lot of people's wish lists, and it never really felt not feasible, but like how are they going to do it? So it's really nice that they put that on the kind of on the radar now for people. But even like as a dev, for me, the managed markets is the one that is like, that's the one I'm most interested in, because I think as a dev, being able to work on a single storefront would effectively just eradicate so much overhead and stress that I think that kind of comes with a lot of the theme work and the app work when having to take multiple stores into account. So for me, that's even though there's nothing dev and kind of dev experience specific in there, that's the one for me that I think will have, the biggest impact long term on these things. So yeah, I think for me, it's just been a really nice, mature release that didn't have any like headline features, but from me, I really, really liked that. It just, felt like a coming of age release and edition.
You touched on the kind of hydrogen vision editing, and I guess to me that felt a bit of I think from Shopify's perspective, they're probably trying to kind of reduce that kind of barrier and that layer of kind of complexity with hydrogen. And I personally think that like the demand around headless within the Shopify ecosystem, as the kind of liquid theming has got stronger, has kind of definitely dropped off. So I can kind of see why they've done it, but it feels a bit counterintuitive because with a lot of the headless builds, most people would use a headless CMS, and that would be one of the main kind of selling points. What's your view on that? Like, why do you think they went down that road?
I think they went down that road because I think one thing like Shopify like to do a lot is remove barriers that don't need to be there. And I think, one of the things that came with headless was you effectively almost needed a full-time dev team to do simple things such as content banner updates and all of, everything akin to that, which all of these things that a lot of people just take for granted, that kind of comes with Liquid. So to me, it's a case of just wanting to still have that offering because there's definitely a need for it. I think you're right in that like the desire and the need for it is diminishing. And I think that's a good thing, but like there definitely is a need for it. And so I think it's a very merchant first approach, being able to give the merchant tools that doesn't necessarily inhibit the developer, but it basically means there's less reliance from the merchant on the developer. So I think that's always a good thing. So I think it's just, it's reducing those barriers that just really don't need to be there. I think in terms of like external content systems, one thing I have seen that was part of this release, that was like a really kind of small mention, was like the ability for external content systems I think meta objects to reference things in external content systems. And they mentioned it being Sanity specific at the moment. And we know Sanity is one of the partners with Shopify when it comes to that. So I think it being like it working with external content systems is going to just be a thing. So again, I don't think there'll be much of a barrier there, but it might be a case of like those external systems are finding their way into Shopify through meta objects. So I think it'll be quite a nice, interesting approach to it all from them.
Grab and create digital flagship stores for iconic brands of today and tomorrow. We are the #1 Sentra agency in the world with more than 50 Sentra implementations to date. We are also e-commerce design specialists, platform and tech partner agnostic. Try our new e-commerce design subscription. Visit Grebin.com.
And I guess this wasn't in the list of questions that we gave you. I think this is quite a big topic that I don't think people are talking about a huge amount, but it does come up every now and then. So one of the other features or enhancements that was mentioned in editions that I think a lot of people have known has been coming is kind of additional styling options within the sections and moving more towards visual editing. I guess like it feels like that's kind of like a big move in the kind of no code direction of Shopify. As I guess someone that runs a big development team and agency, what's your view on that? Like, where do you think that kind of sits, and how do you think that'll change things with that approach?
So I guess we're talking about like theme blocks, and I think they've kind of recently renamed it over to Flex sections, which was always I think their intention of where it's going to be. It's a really, really interesting in the ecosystem conversation at the moment. I don't know if many people are aware, but what they have done with this, and I really like when they do this with these bigger features, is they effectively have like it's all on GitHub and you can have conversations around what they're doing. And recently there was quite an interesting debate on there after the editions where, even like Vanessa Lee was getting involved there, which is awesome to see that, people of that kind of, level within Shopify just coming onto GitHub and interacting with people. But there was a lot of back and forth of like where kind of Shopify are potentially treading on people like that toes, and like even theme developers and kind of what it means for them. I think you're right in that they are trying to go down a more no code approach, which I think is ultimately a good thing because it doesn't eradicate development. It just means that development focus and resource can be pointed somewhere else and somewhere more meaningful, because Shopify are basically just removing this bottom level. So I think it's going to be a good thing. What it means for us, like the original version didn't look like it would really resonate with what we do in any way, shape or form. It was just a fundamentally different offering than what was there. But with they did release a couple of things in this editions, like namely static blocks and I can't remember the other one, but there was a couple of other releases that basically means it looked like us as an agency, we could use it, because before it was a case of like you could have anything everywhere, which that kind of control is just too much, I think, for a merchant. Like merchants come to us because we're the experts at what we do, and effectively removing the ability for us to use our expertise to restrict what they can do, I don't think is a good thing. And so they've kind of given some of that back. So I think ultimately it's going to be a really when this thing drops, I think it's going to be a little bit of chaos, to be honest, everywhere while people find their feet with it. But I think ultimately, and that's the case with a few of these features, which I'm looking forward to talking about, but I think ultimately it's going to just, again, benefit everyone. It'll be easier for merchants to manage. We've kind of got blocks in blocks, which people have been wanting for yonks and yonks and yonks. And removing that bottom level of kind of, I guess, themes and things that don't necessarily need to be there because they can be done by these other things just means the right people, when they can capitalize on it, will be able to direct that focus and expertise into something else, which again is just going to be a good thing, in my opinion.
Swap is the e-commerce operating system powering brands looking to scale, from shipping, tracking and package protection to returns and cross-border. Swap improves every pain point in your operations journey, trading your tech stack for the one system that can manage it all. This is e-commerce evolved.
Makes sense.
Yeah, fully agree on that. I think the flexibility around content, content blocks, nesting, layouts, giving teams, the content teams, the tools, regardless of whether it's a headless or a non-headless architecture, because you're right, that's the architecture shouldn't be an inhibitor to the capability of the business. So it is interesting to see that development. Well, let's get into some specifics now. So as we said when we set this up, we're going to talk about markets, product merchandising, customer service, reporting and analytics. I nearly couldn't say that right. Checkout, POS, and finish off on the chunky topic of B2B with a slight bit of mirth on the fact that, was it Forrester recently named Shopify B2B leader, which still makes me chuckle. But they are moving forward to B2B. So let's start on markets. And me and Paul do a bit of an outtake of what we think is interesting, what it means. And then we're going to get in each of the sections, Dan to do a wrap up of like, from his view as a CTO, what's impressed, and also what else would he want to see, what's still to come. I guess, Paul, the thing that I noticed is that they've improved the structure for how you access markets in the back end of Shopify. It's more intuitive of where you go to get into markets. And the UI is improved visually for the ease of seeing the relationships between parents and child, and the ease of setting parent markets. It's almost like it looks more like a flow builder these days, which is quite, I don't think people are more getting used to that style of visual presentation, like a mind. There's a couple of things I picked up and I think will be interesting to merchants. So you can use the point of sale in other currencies and the base currency. That's a big change. But the one that I was hoping for that still hasn't landed is, and it's been announced, is Shopify payment settlement into multiple currencies. Announced but not delivered yet. So I still think that's a major, I know it's a complex thing to deliver, but it's a major gap for me in markets. What have you picked out in the new markets that is relevant and interesting to merchants?
I think, to be honest, I think they're the main ones. I think the UI piece and kind of changing how things are administered in the admin had to happen. I think a lot of end users and people that are basically working in Shopify got pretty confused by that stuff. There's a lot of things like the price books that were quite hard to manage. Managing some of that stuff will be a lot easier now. So I think that's really positive. The POS one is massive. So that is a big driver for expansion stores. The only thing that I'm not sure on yet is if that's available immediately, but that's something that they had to tick off. I think that would have been pretty high on Bobby's list of kind of RFP tick boxes that kind of need to be addressed. So I think that's really positive. The markets is clearly a lot broader now. So being able to use markets for B2B, and then it feels like it's going to be across all channels, is really positive because I think that was a bit of an unknown. The Shopify payments piece with payouts is still the biggest one, and there's still not really a timeline on that. It's good that they touched on it. But I feel like the whole payment space is in flux at the moment with kind of brands moving to Adyen specifically for that, but then missing features from Shopify payments. So I think it's going to be interesting when that comes. And I don't know what that means for the kind of partnership with Adyen. I think Adyen definitely have a space because we've certainly worked, and you and I work with one of them, for businesses that, have 200, 500 stores using Adyen. They want one payment provider across the board, and they want to be able to share features between the different channels. So I think there's a space for it, but I think it's going to be interesting to see where that goes. Managed markets is interesting. I think that's more of a positioning shift. But similarly with the Adyen and Shopify payments thing, I think it'll be interesting to see what that looks like globally, because there's going to be a migration path there. There's going to be nuance around how things are managed. But yeah, I think as that gets a bit clearer and, is available in other markets, I think that'll be really positive. But yeah, overall, I think it's just good that they're really doubling down on it. The bit that I was slightly not disappointed with, but I think they need to start thinking about, one, pushing app compatibility with markets, and two, there's still a lot of like trading and merchandising features that aren't compatible with markets. So for example, like collection, sort order, or some of the promotion bits. And I think they just need to put a bit more time into that. And then the other one that really annoys me and prevents a lot of the bigger brands from moving to a single store or reducing the number of expansion stores is the third-party payment. So you still can't use Klarna in non-base currency, for example. So I think that's another one they need to address. But overall, I think it's definitely going in the right direction. I think there's just some bigger things that they need to keep chipping away at to make
I think the payments one for me is, I feel a bit frustrated with them on this, because you have the third-party 0.2% transaction fee levied on any third party. So if you go Adyen, and Adyen has some advantages, it's got deeper fraud rules and management. I've just been in a project where actually it's been selected because of that. Shopify's got better fraud capabilities now, but it's not as deep as Adyen's. But I just think unless you provide all of the functionality that the third parties do, so that whole multi-currency settlement piece to avoid FX fees for international, I don't think Shopify should be charging 0.2%. If they've got all of that capability and there's no degradation, then I can understand why they say, well, if you want to use a third party, fine, but that's a 0.2% surcharge. But we've got all the functionality here. But that still sticks with me. I think it's a bit where they shouldn't be. But I know that commercially that's where they make their money. So let's move up, Dan, your view on this in terms of like markets. What have you taken away? What's the CTO's perspective?
My first take on it was here's kind of it was like not announced, but it's almost sort of like the moving of markets from like being underneath settings to effectively being in the left hand side is really elevating to this. It's a core part of Shopify. I know it's always been a core part, but it's under settings and kind of hidden away. So it being elevated to like being a main part of the admin on the sidebar, to be says this really is a massive focus for them. And I think this is just the beginning of what they're going to do. Like, as you kind of mentioned it being a bit of a kind of flow builder is I like, because I'm hoping that will simplify it where it just all flows down in terms of like configuration. Whereas I think at the moment, everything kind of almost just sits alongside each other. So it can kind of be quite confusing. And the one thing for me from a dev perspective that I'm kind of interested to see how it plans out is, and I know we've wanted this for a long time, where it's like a theme per market. And we have the context thing within the customizer, which is really helpful. The interesting thing I'm waiting to see is, a lot of themes kind of do use the GitHub integration, which is effectively linking a theme to GitHub. And if you're going to have a theme per store, it kind of means you can't do that. So I'm interested to see if agencies are going to get into a place of having to support potentially 2, 3, 4, 5, 99, 98% similar themes, but then they do have to be managed differently because you're literally having a theme per market instead of a context, because the context is still under a single theme. So I'm hoping that's not going to be the case, because that's going to be a massive amount of complexity for very little gain.
I was quite surprised with that one, actually. It doesn't feel like, I don't know, I didn't expect that direction necessarily, because it doesn't feel like there would be that much. Maybe if it's like a specific market like Japan, or, Shopify becomes more compatible with mainland China, I could kind of understand it. But yeah, I was quite surprised at that and how some people are talking about it.
Yeah, I think it's one of them things where like if a merchant has the ability to do it, then they will do it. And it's one of them things where I'm hoping with good communication and learning from an agency, they'll kind of know not to just kind of do it willy-nilly, because that can cause a lot of issues. But like one of the most interesting things for me was, you can have multiple B2B markets under like a UK market instead of just a single kind of context that you have at the moment. And I think that's going to pose some really interesting opportunities as well for merchants. And I think that's where like the individual thing can become quite interesting, because it might allow you to do like, you know, kind of almost I'm hoping what they're going to do with this is like really narrow down and be able to like contextualize within markets as well. So effectively within the UK, you could have like a men's market and a women's market, and you could almost like market to them individually. And that's where like individual themes, and like I'm hoping that's kind of where they're going to go down the route of.
It's interesting. It's quite a few of the other platforms do that. So Centra, the markets can be used fairly broadly, and like you could split out gender or any kind of segment of customers into markets, and I've seen a couple of people do that really well. So it would be interesting to see if Shopify do that. And I think there is another platform that do that, but I can't remember who it was.
It's a good point, I think, with how they've kind of shown it, like being able to like, you know, they've done like what's the domain, the language, the currency, being able to just add another thing of customer segment, and that's how you define a market. I feel like would be a relatively easy add for them now. So it'd be really interesting if they do go down that route. It looks like they've laid some really good groundwork for like being able to just expand this into that direction. And hopefully that's what they're doing.
Well, let's move on to product and merchandising. So a couple of highlights for me. I really like the built-in taxonomy that now sits for categories and the sub-classifications. They've got over 10,000 categories now, 2,000 attributes. And why I think this is useful for merchants, if you haven't already used this capability, is you can go in and use standardized classifications to set your core category. It will then give you predefined attributes you can auto apply to it, and then select the values for. Like if you pick furniture, you can then have color. And the standardization is really good rather than having loads of free-form entry. And what I've seen in the past when people have free-form entry for things like tags, and it's not exclusive to Shopify, it's across platforms, is you get lots of duplicate entries, you get lots of misspellings, and you end up with chaos. So pre-definitions are quite useful. It doesn't restrict you because you can use as many meta fields and tags as you want to create all the custom data views you need. Next thing was you can now add bundles to draft orders, which is great for customer services teams who are using that functionality to create orders on the phone and then send links out for customers to complete their orders. And the one that I really like, because I know a few projects I worked on where we've really wanted this, is combined listings. So that where you have multiple products under the same listing on the same page, but they can have unique images, descriptions, URLs, so you don't compromise things like SEO, and you get a better customer experience. That's on Plus only, but I thought that was cool. And then there's a few others, but the other one that I like from a visual merchandiser point of view is filtering now supports icons and images rather than just text. So it's without having to do any customizations, you can actually natively do that piece. I thought that was quite cool. Paul, what have you pulled out for product and merchandising has been useful to merchants?
Yeah, so I remember when we were in Greece, we obviously started recording this and Wi-Fi, or when I was in Greece, prevented it. And I had quite a few things here, but to be honest, I think a lot of what you've said is good. I think the filtering, Dan, we've obviously had to build a lot of workarounds in the past on some of the projects we've worked together on. So I think this will reduce your WhatsApps per project, which is good. I think the combined listing is good. The only one thing I would say, I still think there's instances where you're better off splitting out product, particularly if you want to like merchandise collections more strategically and stuff like that. But I think over time that'll probably get a lot more strong or a lot more flexible, and there'll obviously be pros and cons for different types of retailers. You mentioned the price books piece. So price books is something that I think will eventually be available for B2C customers for things like sale preview and whatever else. But the other one that was rumored to be coming this time around was the broader segmentation stuff. So essentially being able to build like gender level segmentation based on browsing in the admin and kind of push, essentially build like richer segments and then either push those to external systems or use that within the theme. But I think that'll come next time. Same with price books. But yeah, overall, I mean, to be honest, the catalog side over the last 18 months for me is actually the area that's improved the most. And I've actually seen, I think on the first time we tried to record this, I was talking about someone I was chatting to the other day that's got, I think, around 6 million products in Shopify. And they don't use a PIM, and they actually manage the whole catalog in Shopify. And to me, that's just mental. Like, I mean, it's great. It's like, I think back to a few years ago when, you know, managing 5,000 products in Shopify was a nightmare. And then now they've, somehow got to that point. And I think, the way that meta fields and meta objects and the whole catalog piece has come along is massive. And, But anything to add to that, Dan?
For me, like it is almost like a small one, but for me, my favorite one was the taxonomy. Like, going back to kind of what I mentioned really early on, to me, this is one of them things where it's kind of, this is laying the foundation for so much going forward. Like, apps and the whole wider ecosystem being able to depend on these meta fields existing in every single store under the exact same namespace and key the kind of capabilities that come with that and the opportunities is so vast. Like, it's going to do little to nothing now, and I don't mean that in like a bad way, but like a year from now, when this is really kind of taken on by everyone, I can't wait to see what this does. Like, for me, one of the favorite things for us from that is standardizing color between every single store instead of like how we as an agency BAO do it. I think that's so key.
I think on that as well, like for Shopify to have that unified data is massive as well. Like, regardless of where they use it, like in Shop or, you know, part of their integrations, lower channels or whatever else. Like, I think that's massive, and it's just another area where they've just got insanely strong data across the 6 million or whatever stores that the other platforms just won't have.
Yeah, you're right. I think what I also liked as well was, you know, when you add one of these kind of taxonomy categories to your products, like, and you add any of the meta fields it suggests, it then also comes with like default same values. Like colors, as an example, it's got a list of like 30 or 50 colors like for you, so you don't need to then go and set up the same data every single time. So I think that was like, it was just a really, really, really good move. And I like as well that they just chose to, whether you're selling t-shirts, snowboards, or, you know, kind of shoes, the color meta field is the same for all of them. They haven't done like a shoe color or a t-shirt color. So it being completely standardized across the whole taxonomy is awesome. The bundles in draft orders, like the only thing I'll add to that, which I've been waiting for so long, is bundles have always been in the unstable branch of Shopify. So you use them very much at your own peril. And with like the 2024-04 product creation change, it broke a few of ours just kind of overnight. And obviously that's the risk you run with unstable, but we had no choice. So with the 1st of July release, that's finally in a stable branch of the API now. So that's awesome. So we know we won't be, we can basically build bundles comfortably. The combined listing one, like, I think this is probably one of the key dev feature releases. And I fundamentally, I really like it. And to me, this again was, we've kind of like, we as an agency have been doing this for a long time. Like, you've worked with us for a long time. So like linking products by colors has very much been the thing we've been doing for a long, long time. The thing I like about this is, like the taxonomy, it's just a standardized way of doing it now, which is brilliant. And I've been playing around a bit with it, and I really like that in a collection, you can choose to have the parent products that you've created, or you can still merchandise individually. I think that's nice that they've given you that option. But for us, it's just, what this has just given us is just a official way of linking products together, instead of us as an agency coming up with ways to do it that may differ from merchant to merchant. So I really like that. And the only other small thing that came with this was, like, on a PDP, you would change, like, if you wanted to change the variant, it was based on a variant ID. And what they've done now is they've moved everything over to be like option based. And I think that's a really good move as well, because it's just, that's going to scale kind of so much better than this variant thing. So they kind of dropped in a few little places, but like when you can do more than 2,000 variants, they've laid that foundation. So when they want to do that, I think, you know, what devs are going to be doing now to accommodate this combined listing up to 2,000 variants thing, when they want to do all these releases, they're just going to work. So I kind of like that they're kind of getting the groundwork done for that now. and people kind of get ready. And then, when that does drop, it should just work. So, I think it's been a really nice, again, just maturing release of officially, like, this is how we want you to be doing it now. But it didn't necessarily give us anything new, I don't think, quite yet. It might in the future, but I like, there's a standardized way of doing that now.
Cool. Let's move on to the next topic, customer service. And there's only one thing that caught my eye, which was store credit for D2C. And this is massive because I know like the concept of credit in B2B has been there for a while, but I've got a lot of clients who want to give a better like returns experience to customers, but they don't want to just keep refunding everything because obviously it impacts the business. And where returns are requested outside of the window, so if you've got a 14-day window, for example, someone after 20 days calls up or emails, you don't want to tell them to shut off because it's a bad customer experience, but you don't want to give them the money back. So store credit is great because it's a way of saying, look, okay, you're out the window, but hey, look, we're happy. We'll give you back a store credit. Don't worry. We've put that to your account today. It's a brilliant way of keeping the money in the business, but not pissing the customer off. So I know quite a few people who will be happy that that's available. That's the only one I'm pulling out on customer service. Paul, is there anything else that you picked up that I might not notice?
I think there were a few little bits on there, and there were a few other improvements around draft orders from memory, but nothing specific that I can remember. Anything from your side, Dan?
I think the store credit thing, the thing for me that sticks out with that, which like loyalty apps kind of giving discount codes has always been a kind of almost workaround, I feel. I like that they'll now be able to effectively convert points into actual kind of money instead of having to do discount codes. I feel like that's going to be a much better experience and feel a lot more integrated overall. I think the only other one I could remotely think of, and it's not quite customer service, but like the roles within Shopify, I think is quite a nice addition where you can really restrict, salespeople to like the people they should be seeing, the orders they should be seeing, instead of the whole, every single store, every single location's orders. So I think that's a nice kind of, I guess, safety, but also just allows people to focus on what's relevant to them. That's been a nice, I think, addition.
I think they needed to do that for a while. One of the things that's reminded me of that isn't in any way relevant, but there was a piece around transferring data between stores, and that I guess reminded me a bit. You could kind of use that for certain like levels of staging. One thing that I was quite surprised it wasn't in there actually, because when I they did an event in New York in January where they talked about some of the stuff that was going to come this year. And they introduced the kind of 4 different levels of staging. And I think that's something that comes up a lot when it comes to some of the larger RFPs. And like people really struggle with the idea of kind of theme staging versus like true staging environment in like pre-live environments and stuff. But I was quite surprised that didn't come up actually. I think that'll be one that I guess will be in the next editions.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I think it's like with the amount of checkout work we've had to do over the last kind of 9 to 12 months, it's even more of a want and need from merchants. It's kind of almost very easy to replicate true staging environment because the checkout work as well is not just spin up another theme and we'll kind of test it on live. I know you can do profiles, but you don't really want to be testing checkout stuff on a live store. So yeah, I'm completely with you. It's definitely something I'm hoping they can, give us a lot more kind of tools for, hopefully very soon in the future.
Yes, that comes up regularly when I speak to clients who are on other enterprise systems who have got true staging, like on a Salesforce. That's one of the compromises at the moment because it's not a like for like. There are disadvantages to how the staging replication stuff works in those, but knowing that you've got that full robust staging environment gives a lot of people reassurance, so this can be critical for enterprise. So let's move on to reporting and analysis. So a couple of things for me. I know that in the previous drop, I think it's last year, they added the performance reports, essentially like core web vitals within the standard reports for merchants, which is really useful. What I love now is they've got an ability to track the impact of store changes on those performance reports. So if you remove it, uninstall an app or install an app, or as there's a code change, I think that's great because there still is some concern from people about, too many apps equals degradation of performance, and can you rely on those apps to maintain your good score? So the ability to know what changes you're seeing in the underlying data that Shopify is tracking at store level, I think is really useful. I'm not saying that should replace other like proper monitoring tools that people have got, but it's a useful indicative measure. And I just think overall in analytics, they're increasingly offering a level of visualization that was lost when GA went from UA to GA4 and became more of a pure data tool rather than a reporting tool. So there's better data visualization I've seen in the core reports, in the dashboards, like the cohort analysis coming in now. And I think it's actually become a more useful, I call it e-commerce analytics, not a BI, an e-commerce analytics tool for people who want good visual reports and core data, but don't want to have to invest in a third-party license, but isn't a full BI, basically. So that's what I've seen in this release. Paul, what's your take on it?
Yeah, I think this is a big one, to be honest. And earlier I mentioned around some of the stuff, Shopify's data is like a bit of a differentiator that they have. But their reporting, I personally think, is a massive differentiator as well. Like a lot of the other platforms will only provide like base level transaction data. And I think Shopify already was better than people think it was, or has better reports and data than people think it does. But historically, I guess most people that use Shopify would have maybe better reports and potentially like another app or something to build out kind of broader reports from Shopify data. And I think they're getting to a point where you won't need that. I think it's good that you can edit all of the kind of base reports now. Good that you can do a bit more with the dashboard. So yeah, I think this is heading in a really good direction. They have something quite unique around the traffic stuff. I think the next level or the eventual route they could go down would be doing more on the behavioral side, because I think that's a gap for a lot of brands. And there's only really a few kind of vendors filling that, and that's not something that they really have at the moment. But yeah, overall, I think this is a big improvement. And the amount of time people spend in Shopify is higher as a result of this kind of stuff. And also people are definitely willing to house more data in Shopify, which is great for them as well as a result of stuff like this and some of the things around customer data and segments as well. So yeah, I think it's good, and I think it's a good strategy for that. Dan, anything you'd add on that side?
Report analysis is one of my kind of weak points at the moment that I'm actively trying to kind of improve my knowledge on. So yeah, I don't have a great deal to offer, and it's just interested in hearing your thoughts on it, because I know it's very much where you like to live.
Well, interestingly, I've been doing a project recently for someone who's on Woo and looking at the business case of moving to Shopify, and there is some reticence because they set up custom BI and they've got a lot of like critical data because they're massive campaigns, and lifetime value modeling and all that stuff's important. And I think they were pleasantly surprised when I went and showed just what you can get out of Shopify by default versus what you get out of Woo. I'm not denigrating Woo. It's a good platform for a lot of businesses, but Paul, you're right. When you go and look at the 50 odd native reports, including stuff around tax, stuff around like product cost, sales by categories, it can't give you what a BI can give you. But it does give you a really good baseline, and it keeps going up each month. So keep an eye on it. And for those of you who are looking at Shopify or on it and haven't really fully explored the potential, I would highly recommend going in and seeing what you can get out of it. It's quite impressive. Let's move on now to the big one, checkout. A couple of things I'll pull out, and then we'll do the other perspectives. So split shipping was an interesting one. I hadn't expected to see that so soon. I've had a few clients over the last year talk about split shipping. A lot end up not wanting to do it because of logistical complexity of handling it and split shipments. But what I like is the fact you can split the basket for items, can have applied different like shipping methods and rates for them, so that if a good example of this is if you're doing lots of drop shipping, you've got different shipping times and costs based on the supplier they're coming from as one use case for it. But I really like that flexibility. It will suit. It's an edge case. It's not everyone wants this, but it does again come back to your point, Dan, earlier about the maturing of the product and taking away barriers. That's a barrier for some businesses where this edge case is really important. Dan, I'll leave you and Paul to talk about checkout blocks because you're better qualified than I am to talk about that part of it. And then the other one linked to, I guess, split shipping and multiple consignments is automatic payment capture per fulfillment. And again, this is an edge case because a lot of people either take payment up front or they do it all on final dispatch. But this is quite an interesting one, because say if you've got like, multiple 5, 6, 7 shipments within an overall order, that you can capture payment each time an item goes out. And I think this would be really useful, specifically for a lot of like B2B use cases. And then the shipping and taxes are collected when the full order is fulfilled, which is a really smart bit. So I like that, because I guess it helps business. If you've got a high order volume, but it's split into 5 or 6 payments of £400 or £500, instead of waiting until the end, which could be quite long on some tails, you can incrementally get the money and then get full settlement at the end. And then a minor one, but I think useful, pre-filled delivery addresses, defaults. That they can be set so default addresses speed up and improve. So this is, I know that you have this when you register in ShopPay, but this is for, I guess, generally in the checkout. And I know that this has been a pain in the arse for some people who've moved from a platform where they've got that to suddenly not having it. So again, taking away some of those barriers. Paul, over to you.
Yeah, I think they're definitely good ones. I think all the stuff around kind of being able to split out shipments and, add different functionality alongside that. I was looking at, I saw Shipper HQ have already built in things like multiple nominated day slots per shipment and stuff like that. So I think foundationally, this is really solid. We've, in the past, worked on a project with split shipments, which worked, but again, lots of kind of workarounds and little issues, and reporting was a bit of a nightmare. And yeah, so I think having this natively is really good. And again, I think for the bigger merchants, being able to have a bit more control around the multi-channel piece, click and collect and all of that kind of stuff will be really positive. I think the capture piece will be really good for pre-order. So I think that's an area where Shopify can definitely strengthen against maybe some of the other more enterprise platforms. But I think foundationally, that's really good, so that if you've got 6 items and 5 of them are dispatched immediately, but you pre-ordered something that, say it's a sofa and it's 6 months, that you're going to get it in 6 months. I think that's a good thing to have available natively. You touched on ShopPay. I mentioned this the other day, but I think one massive one. So one issue with the express payment methods is often promo codes and opt-ins. And it's a tiny thing that they've added the ability to, or they've added an opt-in box within ShopPay, which is massive, because if 30% of your customers are using ShopPay, you stand to lose 30% of opt-in. So that's a really positive one. But yeah, and I think checkout and Jonathan, Dan, I think you know a lot more than I do around some of the, checkout extensibility pieces and all of that. So I think, maybe, I don't know what your view is overall on checkout, maybe this release, but also over the last kind of 12 months.
Yeah, I mean, it's been just good to see that they've just, they started quick and fast, and they released a lot for checkout, and it's not really slowed down. I think that's just been really nice to see. And I don't think, they're not just working towards feature parity of like the script editor. They're just going and going and going, which is just really nice to see. Like the split shipping one, again, it's more of a maturity thing for me, which I really like, because how they would do it prior to this is it would just take 2 shipping rates, combine them, call it shipping, and that was your only option. The customer had no choice around anything. And as you mentioned, some merchants don't even necessarily want this. So you could do a lot of kind of hacky things in checkout.liquid to try and improve messaging. But with the new checkout, you couldn't do that. And so the nice thing with this is it's giving that messaging to the customers, which I think is just incredibly important when, it's just not obvious that, things can be shipped from 2 different places with 2 different kind of times and 2 different methods. So I think that's really important. Like one of the pieces that wasn't mentioned that we're doing for a merchant at the moment, which has been one of my favorite releases within this, is pickup points. So like they have kind of local pickup, they have, pickup in store, and all of these things they had up until pickup points was based on locations you have set up in Shopify. But pickup points just allow you to effectively feed in any address, and within your checkout, you can allow the customer to choose to have it shipped there. It doesn't need to be set up as a location in Shopify. It doesn't need to have inventory attached to it. And all it will effectively replace the shipping address. And in the admin, it kind of comes across as a standalone kind of piece of UI and functionality. So that I've really enjoyed, because the merchant we have only have a single location within Shopify, but they have 30, 40, 50 bricks and mortar stores, which they want to be able to allow their customers to order to. So pickup points has been a really nice thing for me, and it's a request only plus feature, but that's been awesome. Checkout blocks becoming, I guess, borderline baseline. It's a free app for all plus merchants. I think it's an interesting move. I really like it. Like, we've not had much hands-on experience with checkout blocks. I think my take on checkout blocks is it's really good. I think we work in a bit of a specific niche where everything we do is fully bespoke. We don't use themes from the theme store. Everything we do is completely hand-rolled from scratch. And our merchants have a lot of, I guess, specific issues to solve. And I think checkout blocks it's almost like, just getting an incredibly good theme from the theme store. It'll get you a really, really, really long way. And it being free now means it's going to get even more people a long, long way. And that's nothing but good. But with our merchants specifically, what we found is they need that little bit more. For me, the biggest thing it's given people now is the visual branding editor for the checkout. I think, from speaking to a few people at other agencies, and I completely understand why this was done, but a lot of them would effectively just make kind of hand-rolled API calls to update it. And, once it's kind of done, merchants don't really change it, but like being able to see visually what you're doing and giving that kind of control to the merchant, I think is a really, really nice addition. Like we did our own one of these about 12 months ago, so we've not had to use it, but I think that being available for all plus merchants, because the native one gives you 3% of what you can actually do. So I think that's really, really good that that's in the hands of merchants now. So, and I think, Shopify are going to do more and more with it. So it's really interesting to see what they do. So I think overall it's been really good. And yeah, it's good.
Checkout blocks. Sorry, I've cut you off there.
No, that's fine.
You've checkout blocks. One thing that I quite like about it is, one thing that I think made this a positive change is whenever I've seen Shopify do demos, half the time they're using checkout blocks. And I think that it almost doesn't look great that they're kind of using an app to showcase functionality that should probably be native. So I think it's positive in that respect. But I also think there's a lot of cool stuff you can do with checkout blocks that now might take 2 minutes instead of, having to think about it, stick it on the roadmap, scope it out. Things like if you're running a loyalty program, you can rename the shipping options and say you're offering free loyalty or you offer free shipping, stuff like that, or like renaming shipping options so that they come across super local for a German market. And there's loads of other little things like that. So I think it's really positive that functionality is available now. But I guess over time that'll probably come into the admin and they'll move away from the app. But I think having Gil in their team pushing this area will definitely be beneficial for merchants.
Yeah, it's a no-brainer, isn't it? All those little things that make managing the checkout easier without having to look at properly customizing it, because you don't want to customize the checkout that works fundamentally well. So that's checkout. I'm going to skip the POS stuff because we covered parts of it in early elements. And I'm going to move on to the topic of B2B. So I know it's an area that Shopify have focused on. They want to be considered a more mature B2B platform. They're still quite behind leaders. They're definitely behind the likes of a big commerce from a SaaS point of view, and there's obviously more specialist B2Bs out there. I'm quite impressed with how they keep regularly rolling out additional functionality. It's evolved way past like the basic for wholesale channel that it used to be. They've now got a proper out-the-box theme. Now, it's not going to suit everybody, but for those people who've got a simple B2B launch and want something native that they can just release and tailor their brand into and get quickly launched, I think that's a massive benefit. There's also the ability to have multiple B2B stores where you can have different catalog content, etc. So if you have different B2B audiences, you can run those multiple stores and tailor the offering. The couple of functional improvements I really like. So you can take deposits now on checkout for Plus. I think this is Plus only from what I saw. So this is useful for a few people I know who will have a deposit on order and then payment on balance on shipment, which could be many months down in the future. So that's now standard, and also added in, and this is request access only, which I believe simply means that it's there, but it's not for public release. You've got to specifically get on a list to have it enabled to your store. But shipping rates based on weight and destination, and that is huge in B2B, the need to have that because of volumetrics, which can massively influence the cost of shipping different types of products. So I thought it was quite cool. There's, again, some useful functional benefits for merchants. Paul, anything to add on that? Anything else you picked out?
Not really, to be fair. I think the markets piece was good. But to be honest, I didn't really focus on that too much just because I don't spend as much time in that area. So I was definitely more focused on the checkout and Omni stuff and the analytics, etc. I think a few other bits that we haven't mentioned. So a few tiny things. So flow with the segments, I think is really positive. So being able to factor segments into flows was really good. We haven't talked about AI, and I think that's probably not a bad thing, but I think Shopify again is like way ahead of the average platform on that side, and I think it's going to be, I think things like the image editing and stuff like that was way more SMB. And the only one thing that I did one of these a couple of days ago with Eunice and Miko, and the only one thing I would say about Editions now actually is that they do have some features that are way more SMB focused, like usage of AI media and all of that stuff. And then they've got super enterprise stuff. So I think at some point they could benefit from having more focused delivery of some of this stuff. So they're kind of talking to, some of the newer partners they're bringing on, like the CGIs and the Accentures, etc. And then maybe more kind of feature level stuff for the smaller kind of core customers. And then there's one other one that I had in my little list over here, but I can't remember what it was. But yeah, I mean, overall, I think just to summarize, I think this is a really solid additions, but I think the next one will be interesting because there are still a few bigger things that are missing. The other one that I've got here is the content scheduling and like campaign level stuff within Shopify that I think they need, particularly when they're kind of taking brands off Salesforce and everything else. So I think that'll be something we hopefully see in the next one. But overall, yeah, really positive. And again, this is something that's very unique to Shopify. And as much as we're almost trying to pick holes in it a little bit just to play devil's advocate, you just don't see this stuff from any other tech vendors almost. So yeah, it's super exciting, and I think it's really positive.
So I guess, Dan, final words from you, sir. Like anything else that you want to flag? Any bits that you've picked up on that we haven't covered?
I think the interesting thing for me, and they never make a song and dance about this, but I really love the kind of approach they're taking with it, and it always gets dominated by checkout extensibility. Fundamentally, they're introducing extensibility everywhere. The big one that is still probably not the right time to be talking about it, but the customer account extensibility stuff, I think it's going to be as big as the checkout stuff. I think when it comes, it's going to, and what apps are going to be able to do with that. And once it's all integrated, it's going to be phenomenal. I think what they're going to be able to do with that. But there's also just tiny little things effectively having admin action and block extensions everywhere. So you'll see it with things like the combined listings, but the product pages, so that you can put blocks within product pages. You can do it within segments. You can do it. They're doing that throughout the whole admin, and again, they just make a tiny little footnote kind of in every editions, and that's why I'm really enjoying seeing. And it's one of these things where in a year's time where, I think a lot of apps are really taking advantage of these. You're going to see such a cohesive experience. You're going to have less and less apps taking you off to their own kind of portal to do things, and they're going to give you so much. It's all just going to feel so native, and people will look at Shopify and it's a Shopify admin that they do. You can't extend at all, and it's just so not true anymore. And just the direction they're going is, for me as a dev, and I think long term for the merchants as well, it's going to just be such a fulfilling and just enjoyable experience that I'm just really looking forward to contributing to, but also just kind of partaking in once, everyone does start jumping on this extensibility.
I think the whole admin, the UI, like you say, like all of the kind of functions, admin, like all of that whole piece is like Apple level. Like, I think they don't get enough credit for that. I think again, like light years ahead of any other platform on that side, to be perfectly honest. And I think that's really heading in the right direction. One thing that I think will be really interesting, because there's loads of new functionality coming out around accounts, but it's all being linked to new accounts. And I think Shopify's long-term direction there will be driven by first-party data and, unified logins and everything else, which I think will be really positive for them. It'll be interesting to see, kind of how that progresses. Like, I don't know if you've got a view on that, on like new accounts and the kind of when people should be looking at that and some of the things that are missing.
It's a really good question. I think like the biggest stuff, like they're usable now. I think the problem you've got is all of the stuff they talk about and all of the kind of cool new stuff is still behind the developer preview. So like they're definitely usable, and I think they're a pretty good experience, but they don't offer a great deal more than the liquid things. So you've got things like kind of native returns, and you can use them alongside each other, but it's such a different experience. It just feels quite weird to use them alongside each other. But, for me, there will come a day when begins checkout.liquid, there's no more customer liquid things, and they will be moved over to these new things. And I think what they did with the checkout, the forced adoption with, like this is the date it's going to happen. I think that was a really good thing. They gave people enough time, and I think that thing will happen. And I think, when that does, that's when you'll really see the momentum move towards it. But I think it's human nature to just kind of stick with what you know. And I think until Shopify kind of force people's hand, and they're right not to do it yet because it's not there. But I think when they do, you probably get 6 months away in like the checkout stuff, and then you'll start to see a mass adoption. And they'll probably remove the option, the classic ones, and all that. But I think until that point, people just probably won't look at them because they are just so different. And I think they need an actual killer selling point. And at the moment, that's only going to come from an app. And I don't think an app's able to do that to a scale where, it would kind of tip the weight. But for me personally, I can't wait to see it. I've really enjoyed what they've done with checkout, and kind of the removal of checkout.liquid. And I think the customer account stuff's going to be even better. I'm really looking forward to when they do that.
Makes sense.
Excellent. Well, I hope people listening have got a lot of value out of this. We've covered a lot of ground today. Anything you think we've missed that is interesting or exciting for you or your clients, let us know. We'd love to add it to the comments when we post it. Anything you disagree with, or anything you want to call out of, things you're a bit underwhelmed by, we'd love to hear as well. We know that Shopify's making massive progress, but no platform is perfect, and there are still gaps in the offering. So do keep an ear out for our next episode as well, and make sure you're following us on LinkedIn and subscribe to our LinkedIn newsletter. Take care, everyone. And Dan, thanks as always for joining us.
Yeah, pleasure being here. Nice seeing you both again.
You're listening to the Inside Commerce podcast, hosted by experienced consultants James Gerd and Paul Rogers. Inside Commerce is your fast track to digital knowledge, featuring interviews with leading e-commerce retailers, industry thought leaders, and the C-suite of key tech companies to explore the latest in digital strategy, customer experience, and tech. Discover what the latest trends really mean and get practical advice based on experience to help fine-tune your e-commerce strategy and tech stack. Follow us on LinkedIn and reach out to James or Paul if you'd like to discuss an e-commerce project. We hope you enjoy the latest episode.